And I'm Mr. Radford.
Welcome to the Viking Science Academy. We've already talked about how the Earth has changed over time, and today we're going to take a look at how living things have changed over time. And we call this evolution, is the basic principle that we use to describe this. It's had a lot of different beliefs behind it over the years. So what was one of the most popular ones a while ago?
Lamarck was one of the kind of set of scientists that said basically like the will of the animal kind of is what drove changes that we would see. And so, like for example, a giraffe, just by it gradually stretching its neck to try to get the leaves to eat over time, that's eventually what that stretching is what eventually changed and why their necks became longer.
There's a lot of evidence that shows that that's not how it is, because you can make a lot of adjustments to animals and you're not going to see that reflected in the next generation or really any generations. For example, you know, if you cut off a dog or cat's tail, their puppies are not going to be born without tails. So later on, kind of building on Lamarckism's work though, came Charles Darwin, and he had a great job, a hard job, but a great job. And he basically was a naturalist on a boat and sailed all over the world, and he really liked fossils, and he really started noticing some things in fossils. And he came up with his Origin of the Species, which is basically two kind of theories that he has on how life has changed over time. So we call that survival of the fittest, or natural selection is kind of the common term for it. A quote from his book, what he noticed was that if someone had something that was favorable, so it gave me that thing an advantage over another animal of the same species, it was more likely that I would survive if I had that advantage than you. And if I survive, I can live to have offspring, and my offspring will have that advantage as well. And so favorable variations were preserved, and unfavorable ones would be destroyed by survival of the fittest.
They were selected out.
Yeah. So we see this all over the place. Dogs and horses, we have, as humans, been choosing sexual selection for them for a long time. We breed them, and it's led us to a wide variety of breeds of dogs and race horses and stock horses and all kinds of breeds of horses. And we look for traits that we like and we breed them, or we look for traits we don't like and we breed them out. Do you know anything about those moths in England?
Was it the camouflage part? Yeah. Industrial Revolution, they put soot up into the sky and it stuck to almost everything.
It's gray. The whole city was gray.
Yeah.
So you had moths that used to live there that were green. Well, those moths, a green moth landing on a gray wall, it's pretty easy for a bird to pick out. So those green moths got eaten quite quickly, whereas the moths that were a little bit more towards the gray side, just from colorization, tended to survive. And pretty soon you have a whole new species of moths in the city that are gray versus the same ancestor species of moth in the forest that are green or brown. So we can also trace this back through fossils. So for example, here is the evolution of the modern horse. It hasn't always looked like the modern horse. It's looked a lot of different things. And over time, its favorability to be faster and stronger and bigger has led to this evolution of the modern horse. So does something evolve just because it wants to? Like, I would really like to be taller.
Yeah.
Would you like to be taller?
I always tell my kids, when I coming into school in the morning, I'd like to have three arms.
Yeah,
you know, got it so much stuff to carry. Yeah. It doesn't work that way.
No, just because you want to, you can't make something adapt. You can't make your genes change. And so a beaver's not going to ever get a chainsaw for a hand. Yeah. But there are some processes that do occur naturally. And the first is divergent evolution.
Mrs. Schmidt, come to the main office, please. Mrs. Schmidt, you need to come to the main office, please.
This is like those moths we were talking about. Here we see finches who have adapted different beaks for eating. And we see tree frogs who have, through being killed off, evolved into two different colorizations to blend in. So divergent means they're going in opposite directions. They start in the single species, and because of where they live and the environment and survival, we end up with different variations of that original species. We've also got homologous structures. What are these about?
So these are just structures that we can see that are very similar in different organisms.
So maybe a common ancestry of some sort. And building the same. So the same three bones are found in pretty much all larger animals. Even whales have some of these leg bones, even though they don't have legs. So, and snakes. So vestigial organs, I like these because this is a good example of things that are evolving their way out. Stuff we don't use over time, it's not an advantage. It's going to evolve its way out. So ear muscles, boa constrictor, if you look at their skeleton, they have little tiny leg bones in the back inside the skin. Your
the appendix. I got mine removed when I was 10.
Oh, so, nice. Did it burst?
No, it did not. Thank goodness.
So we can see how it's an advantage sometimes to not have things as well. So, and then we have convergent evolution. So here we have like 4 different versions of what I'd call an anteater of some sort. And if you look at their structures, they've got long noses, sharp claws, and long tails to balance out this long nose. Yet they evolved on 4 different continents. So how does this happen? Well, they're all eating ants. Yeah. If you want to eat ants, you better have a long nose and be able to dig and not fall over. And so these are species that started out all separate, but because of their lifestyle and how they've chosen to survive, have evolved into similar creatures through their environment. And so I like these guys. Again, nature is selecting the beneficial traits. Yeah, makes them easier to survive. I think this is one of the most powerful. Mr. Rose is on it today. He is.
Please go to the main office. Lexi Bussey and Luciano.
I think this is one of the most interesting ones for evolutionary process. And it's if we look at the embryonic stages of many different animals. So I'm telling you right now that row 1 is numerous different types of animals. We see a really similar structure to how they are originating in their origin. And if we go further here, we can see that they're going to evolve into all kinds of things. We've got fish, chickens, pigs, rabbits, and even humans. They're all the way on the right. So there are these evolutionary processes that all animals have went through, but we still kind of go back to the same base, the base of life and how things are evolving. And one thing to remember, too, is that Darwin, he went through his studies. It was all based on his observations. He didn't know about DNA and genetics and stuff. Any modern science. So. And it was really controversial because it went against a lot of things. He even struggled with because he was what to do with his information. And I think a lot of people misinterpret his information and say, oh, well, that means he doesn't believe in God or doesn't believe in this. And that wasn't really anything he was talking about. He was just talking about how things change over time and how it's because of survival. So in that, we also get genetic drift. And this is my favorite because I tell all my students, you are all some form of a mutant. And it's mutations that lead to these new features.
Main office, please, Ms. Schmidt.
And so here we have a calico cat. We have people that are born with extra muscles or not as many muscles and all kinds of mutations. And if those mutations are favorable and lead to a higher survival rate, they're going to become part of that species. If they're not favorable, then they could wipe out that species. But genetic drift is really important for evolution. So it powers evolution. Variations. Variation. So, taking a look at it, how can we tell, is there something besides just looking at it? Like, I think a horse and a zebra look a lot alike. So, like I said, now we have the technology, we can look at their genes and the DNA and see, and we can compare, basically kind of going back into the history of of everything and be able to see those connections and see where things may have branched off. Okay. And a lot of people think of it like, well, we must have come from this, who came from that, who came from this, who came from that, who came from a bug or something. Well, that's not really how it works. It's not like a ladder. We have a common ancestor of just life, and then as life has progressed and time has went on, we see more and more branches to that tree. And we're on one branch of that tree, and monkeys are on another branch, but maybe we share a common big branch way somewhere down the trunk. So another really important feature of evolutionary process is sexual selection. Again, I tell my students, you guys do this in the hall, you may not realize that the guys kind of strip their stuff and the girls kind of flirt, and it's sexual selection. And some animals it's more prevalent than in humans, but birds are awesome. Oh, birds are great. Males display, they have all kinds of their calls, colorations, how their behavior, they're trying to get selected to be successful to pass on their genes. If I'm a female, I'm going to pick the best guy that I think was going to give me the strongest kid so my kids survive. And I'm not consciously thinking that, but that is what is my sexual selection process has been built to do. So for example, in elephant seals, which have fierce fights for females, only 4% of the males actually do 85% of the mating. So you're only passing on a really small portion of the genes. It better be top-notch genes. So All right, this leads to a wide variety of species on the earth. And some people, I think that, well, obviously fish and mammals and big humans are the dominant species and the dominant types of animals on earth, but really it's not. We're completely outnumbered by insects, and there's a lot of other varieties in plants and fungus and bacteria. So you take all these different species and you have this huge spectrum of things that have evolved differently and with other organisms over time.
And if you also kind of look at these numbers, as we get away from the trunk, there's going to be, this is kind of showing that there are
branching.
all of those branches. Look at all of those numbers as we go up in kind of the complexity of life.
Yeah,
as well.
it's pretty awesome. So next time, or one more thing, if you want to remember the 4 important things that are necessary for any type of evolution or change over time to occur, then we have a simple kind of way that you can remember it.
Mnemonic device.
Mnemonic device, that's right.
Yep.
VIST. So evolution requires variation. We have to have that genetic drift or mix-up in the DNA. It requires inheritance, and we've proven that with Mendel, that parents pass on their genes to their children. Selection, so some traits are going to be selected out either by nature or maybe through sexual selection.
Yep.
And then finally, time. You're not going to have one generation produce a dramatically different offspring the next generation. It takes millions, billions of years for evolution to occur. And during that time, we've seen tons of changes. Whales have been in the water, out of the water, and back in the water as a species. So there's just a lot of differences to this. But if you want to remember the 4 main things, variation, inheritance, selection, and time. So that's it for today, and next time we're going to go over how humans have changed over time, or human evolution. Thanks for joining us on the Viking Science Academy.